Alright. Where are we? What daf we up to? 23, right? Ooh, and then what's that? Okay, this is gonna be. There's some technical stuff on this stuff. There's some technical stuff here. Okie dokie. Well, what can I tell you? Alright, we're gonna start off. We're gonna learn what? 3 Mishnayos today? 1, 2, 3 Mishnayos today. Alright, here we go. We're gonna start with the first one. On Daf Chof Beis Amud Beis. Okay. About 10-15 lines from the bottom, says the Mishnah. Marchikin es asulam min hashovach arba amis kidei shelo tikpotz hanemiya. Okay. So if Reuven and Shimon are neighbors, and there's a wall dividing the two, I'm just thinking a second, what's 58 minus 25? 58 minus 25, that's what, 33? Okay. Okay, sorry, totally unrelated. Fine. So Machikin is okay. So if you have Reuven and Shimon are neighbors, and there's a wall between their properties. Reuven has a dovecote on his property. Shimon wants to lean a ladder against the dividing wall. So again, Marchikin es asulam min hashovach. We have to make sure that Shimon's ladder is distanced from Reuven's dovecote, 4 amis. 4 amis. Kadei shelo tikpotz hanemiya. So that a martin, what's a martin? I probably should have Googled it. What the heck is a martin? It's some kind of weasel, I guess. The heck's a weasel? Is it kind of like a squirrel? I don't know. But we don't want the martin to leap from the ladder into Reuven's dovecote and commit a massacre. Okay, so therefore Shimon should not lean his ladder within 4 amis of Reuven's dovecote. Okay, fine. And as we learned at the end of the daf yesterday, that if Reuven's gutters, his roof be'etzem, so Shimon should not build a wall within 4 amis of the gutter, so that b'midat hatzorech, that if Reuven needs to get up on his roof to clean the gutters, he'll have 4 amis to lean his ladder. Okay. Says the Gemara. So let's say that the Mishnah is unlike Rabbi Yossi. The Rabbi Yossi Omar zechofer besoch shelo v'zenotea besoch shelo. Because as we've seen already since BavaBasra, the end of BavaBasra, and has come up throughout the parak so far, and as we're going to learn as we're going to learn the Chof Hey, I think, right? I think Chof Hey. Amud Beis, okay. Rabbi Yossi's opinion, in the case where Shimon has a pit and Reuven has a tree, Rabbi Yossi's opinion is, so whereas the Chachamim say that Reuven's got to do something about his tree because the roots are going to ruin Shimon's pit. Rabbi Yossi says, look, Shimon's allowed to build a pit in his property, and Reuven's allowed to plant a tree in his property. And don't tell Reuven you can't plant a tree on your property. So even though Rabbi Yossi says over there that leave Reuven alone, and yet over here we're saying Shimon, don't put your ladder too close to Reuven's dovecote. It's according to Rabbi Yossi, we would say Shimon can do whatever he wants in his property. So again, so Lema Masnisin Delok Rabbi Yossi. So let's say that our Mishnah is unlike Rabbi Yossi because we're saying that Shimon's got to make sure not to damage Reuven's dovecote. The Rabbi Yossi, because if it's Rabbi Yossi, he says Zechofer b'soch shelo, v'zenotea b'soch shelo, that each person can do what they want on their own property. Shimon can dig a pit in his property. Reuven can plant a tree in his property. And similarly over here, Reuven can have a dovecote in his property. Shimon can put his ladder wherever he wants on his own property. That's what I would imagine Rabbi Yossi would say. So afilu teim Rabbi Yossi, you can even say that, right, that this is like Rabbi Yossi, because Rav Ashi says, Ki avinu be'Rav Kahana, when we were by the Besmedrash of Rav Kahana, Omar, he said, Modi Rabbi Yossi begire didei. That, look, Rabbi Yossi says that Reuven's allowed to plant a tree on his property, even though eventually the roots might interfere with Shimon's pit. But right now, Reuven's tree is not interfering with Shimon's pit. It's going to take a lot of time. It's going to take a long time before Reuven's tree interferes with Shimon's pit. And therefore Reuven could plant a tree on his property. But in a scenario like we saw at the end of Bava Metzia, right, when there was like a leak in the roof and it was directly going to the lower apartment, so where the damage is happening directly, then Rabbi Yossi would say that it is a problem. And here oichet, tochinami, here oichet, zimnin de bahade de monachle, what could happen potentially is that Shimon can put the ladder against the wall and punkt, yosva bechor, v'kofza, the martin is going to be sitting in some hole and is going to jump off the ladder and cause a massacre Reuven's doves. So therefore, it could be that, as a direct result of his action of putting the ladder there, the marten then went and massacred Reuven's doves. But wouldn't that be a grama? It'd be a grama. Shimon didn't massacre Reuven's doves. Shimon put a ladder down. What then ensued was there was a marten, and the marten jumped on the ladder and pinned the ladder into a dovecote, and there was a massacre. But it's a grama. One thing led to the next. So Omar Reb Tovi Bar Masna Zosumer is grama b'nizakin osur. So says Reb Tovi Bar Masna. Well, this seems to be saying that grama b'nizakin is osur. That that a grama, when it comes to damages, is pasha, is taka a problem. Is taka a problem. Is taka a problem, as we see. That Shimon's not massacring the doves, he's just pasha putting the ladder there. But then what happens is the marten goes and Shimon's responsible. Okie dokie. Rav Yosef Havale Hanu Taile. Rav Yosef had these date palms. Davu Osu Umne V'Yasve Tusayu. That the bloodletters would come and they would bloodlet under these date palms. So if Yosef had these date palms, and the bloodletters would have decided that they were going to bloodlet under these date palms. The Osu Orve, and then what happens is what was it? I thought Orve were ravens. I think the article defined them as crows. Alright, why not? So V'asu Orve, then the crows would come, Achle Dama, and they would eat the blood that was there, I guess. V'salke Abetale, and then they would go up to the palm trees. Umavzdi Tamrin, they would get the dates all bloody, and it was causing a loss to Rav Yosef. So Rav Yosef was not very happy that these bloodletters were creating such a mess for him. So Rav Yosef says to the bloodletters, Afikuli korko me'acha, nu get out of here. So Abaye though plays a bloodletter's advocate. V'hagramu, I mean, they're not responsible. They're not directly causing the damage to the dates. It's a grama. They're bloodletting under the tree. And then as a result of that, what's end up happening is that then these crows are coming and they're eating the blood and going up to the tree and ruining the date. But it's just a grama. So Omalei, so Rav Yosef says to Abaye, Hachyam Rav Tovi Bar Masna, Zos Omer is grama b'nizakin also, right? That we just said that grama b'nizakin is also. But then Abaye says, okay, fine. But what about the fact that the bloodletters have a chazaka? That they've been doing it for a long enough time and you haven't stopped them until now. So they could say that, well, we've been doing it until now. We have a chazaka. We're gonna learn, Chezkas Abatim is right around the corner. I think Chezkas Abatim, we're gonna learn all about chazakos. But anyways, so says Abaye to Rav Yosef, can't they argue that, well, we've been here and you haven't stopped us until now, so let us continue. Where am I? So ha'amar Rav Nachman Rav Barvua ein chazaka l'nezakin. But Rav Nachman and Rav Barvua says that there is no concept of chazaka when it comes to nezakin, when it comes to damages. When it comes to damage, there's no such concept of well, we've been causing damage for so long, and so we were allowed to continue. But wasn't it stated, Rav Mori Omar Bekutra Rav Zvid Omar Beves Akise? But it was stated about that when we say ein grama, ein chazaka l'nezakin, that's in specific cases. For example, smoke or a bathroom. So meaning smoke. Right, if there's like smoke that's like thick smoke, I guess, that's like going over an area and like causing damage. So the person responsible for the smoke can't make the argument, well, you let us do this for long enough. No, there's no chazaka when it comes to smoke or when it comes to a bathroom, right? Back in the day, I guess people just kind of like go to the bathroom, on, like there's no like plumbing and stuff. You would just kind of do your thing on the field or whatever. So so you can't say, well, we've been using this place as a bathroom for long enough. No, because a bathroom is something disgusting, and therefore, you can't just say, well, we have a chazaka. No, there's no chazaka when it comes to that. So Abaye asks of Yosef, don't tell me, so meaning Abaye said, well, these bloodletters have a chazaka. Rav Yosef said, yeah, but there's no chazaka when it comes to damages. Abaye says, well, that's specifically when it comes to smoke and when it comes to a bathroom. So Amalei, so Rav Yosef says to Abaye, Ledidi da anina da'atoi ki kutra uvesakise damu li. Yeah, but for me, because I'm very, I guess, particular. So this whole matzav with the bloodletters and the crows and the blood and the dates is for me the equivalent of a situation of like smoke or a bathroom where you could say, hey, I'm not cool with this, and there's no don't make the argument that you've been doing it long enough. There is no such argument. I'm like fading a shtick. What time is it? It's 7:30 at night. Yeah, it's already getting a little late, but okay. Well, we're just gonna fight through it. We're just gonna keep on going weiter. Okie dokie. Next, Mishnah. Marchikin es hashovoch min ha'ir chamishim amo shnai kis. Chevre, when I saw this Mishnah, it was Shabbos. I was learning this Mishnah on Shabbos. When I saw this Mishnah, I said, this looks familiar. This was a Mishnah from Bava Kama. I remember I didn't understand this. I remember it was at the end of the parak. It was the end of Meruba. And I remember saying on the podcast, I was like trying to fudge my way through. I said I don't understand this. But I think I understand it better this time. But maybe it's easier this time. I don't know. But anyways, I saw this. I was like, wait a second. I know that was the Gemara in Bava Kama where I didn't understand it. Alright. Says the Mishnah, Machikin es ha-shovach, right, we say, where does it say? Bava Kama, Pei Gimel Mid Aleph. Machikin es ha-shovach min ha'ir chamishim amma. So if you make a dovecote outside of a city, so you have to distance it 50 amis from the city, because we don't want your birds to fly into the city and eat people's stuff. You ever go to Shuk Machne Yehuda, there's always birds in there trying to eat the pitzuchim. So if you can have a dovecote, you have to distance it 50 amas from the city, so that the doves are not going to fly into the city to eat from other people's things. So machikin es hashovach min ir 50 amma v'lo yaisa adam shovach besoch shelo elo im kein yesh lo 50 amma l'chol ruach. And if a person wants to make a dovecote on his property, well, he can only do so if there's 50 amas in all directions, so that if the dove flies away, it won't eat anything. We're going to have to explain what this 50 amas thing is. We'll get there. But anyways, so if you make a dovecote outside the city, it needs to be 50 amas. If you want to make it in your backyard, make sure that there's 50 amas in all directions, because the assumption is that if it's less than that, it will be eating from other people's stuff. Rabbi Omer says, Rabbi Beis Arboas Korin Milo Sheger Ayona, a much larger size. I think it was like 273 amas or something. A much bigger size, according to Rabbi Yehuda, as far as it would fly in one flight, I guess. Vimlakho maybe. Afilu beis rova areu b'chezkaso. But if you buy it from somebody else, so let's say you buy a house from somebody, and in the backyard there is a dovecote back there, and there isn't 50 amas in all directions, and that's okay. You kind of get grandfathered into it. You can assume that, well, the person you bought it from has a chazaka that this dovecote was there for a long enough time, and nobody apparently gave him a hard time about it. So therefore, you can get grandfathered into that. All right, fine. So okay. Oh, excuse me. Oh, Babylon. Oh, yeah. Excuse me, Babylon. Yeah, sorry. So, I guess I think generally recently I've been recording, I think, earlier in the day, so I'm not as tired. But yeah, whatever, today I just had stuff that I had to finish, and I wanted to finish it before I stopped to record. Okay. Chamishim amo v'sulo. Okay, so what's this 50 amos business, right? So we're saying that you distance the dovecote from the city 50 amos. Because if it's less than 50 amos, it's going to fly into the city and eat from other people's food. But that implies that 50 amos is enough. It's not going to fly more than 50 amos. It's not going to fly 100 amos. It's not going to fly into the city because it's 50 amos away. So chamishim amos v'sulo, all it takes is 50 amos. We have a contradiction. In Parsin Nishavin Leonin, we don't put out traps for doves. You have to distance your traps from the city 30 ris, which is a lot more. We're going to see 50 amas, 30 ris, 100 mil. I don't know what's what, but each one seems to be bigger than the next. Right? 50 amas is the smallest, then 30 ris, then 100 mil. But anyways, 30 ris is much more than 50 amas. And we're saying that if you want to put traps outside of the city, you have to distance them at least 30 ris. Because anything closer than that, you might be trapping somebody else's bird. And that's not okay. Right, so unless where you have to distance the trap 30 ris. So we see, therefore, that birds fly even 30 ris. Much more than 50 amas. So Rabbi Meshet Shaite Tuva, yeah, sure, they could fly far. Yeah, sure, they could fly 50 ris, 30 ris. V'karsayu b'chamishim am samayu, but they only eat within the first 50 amas. So they can fly really far, but they're not. Once they pass 50 amas, they're not going to be eating anymore. They eat with it. The first 50 amas is where they get their food, and then they can fly really far, but they're not going to be eating at that point. And therefore, over here, when we're concerned about eating from somebody else's stuff, so 50, distancing 50 amas should do the trick. Okay, and now we're saying, okay, so you have to put out the traps at least 30 ris away, because less than that you might be stealing somebody else's bird. Implying that 30 ris though is enough. At that point, you're not going to be stealing anybody's bird. Does that mean that these birds only fly 30 ris? That if it's in a settled area, afilu meya mil. Lo yifros. Don't put out the traps even 100 mil away. So apparently, birds can even fly 100 mil, which is more than 30 ris. So if Yosef Omer says, if Yosef b'yishuv kromim, if Yosef says that the 100 mil thing is talking about in a place where there's lots of vineyards, because then the birds will fly from one vineyard to the next, and that's how they can go really far. Rava Omer b'yishuv shovchin. Rava says that it's talking about where it's going 100 mil is where it can fly from one dovecote to the next. And that's why it can go really far, because it's got all these checkpoints or whatever, these dovecotes. Mishum shovchin gufay. But one second. Why are we saying that if it's in a yishuv of shovchin, it's in a place where there's lots of dovecotes, so you can't put out traps because maybe it's somebody else's, bird, if it's within 100 mil. But why don't you just say you can't put out traps because there are other people's dovecotes, because there are other people's birds. Right? Rava says, right, we're saying b'yishuv shovchin that it can travel, that there's, somebody's bird can travel 100 mil if there's lots of dovecotes. But why don't you just say that, well, if there's lots of dovecotes and there's lots of dovecotes, obviously you can't be putting out traps in people's dovecotes. So well, one possible answer is that maybe they belong to the trapper, these dovecotes. In which case, there's no problem. So that's not an argument of like the dovecote isn't the argument. The issue is that somebody else's bird may have flown, 100 mil. Maybe the dovecotes belong to a knaini. Maybe the dovecotes are hefker. And so therefore in those cases the issue would not be with the dovecotes. The issue would be that maybe the bird flew from somebody else's bird flew there up to 100 mil. Yeah. Okay, so Abuda had said that you have to have an area around the dovecote 4 core, right? Was that it? Yeah, much bigger. But then this is the important part. That if, however, you bought a property that had a dovecote in it already, even if it's less than the requisite amount, you kind of get grandfathered in. So Rav Papa says, Rav Papa, Vitem Rav Zvid also merits that this says, To'anin l'lokech v'to'anin l'yorish. That Bezdin makes a claim on behalf of a purchaser as well as on behalf of heirs. Meaning, if a person purchases a property, he doesn't need to what does Rashi say? Wow. Okay. Right. Right. Meaning, if a person who buys a property, does it? Oh gosh. So basically, if a person purchases a property, and then somebody else comes and says, "Hey, it's my property." So if the purchaser doesn't need to prove that the person who he purchased it from bought it from that other person. If he could just prove that the person who bought it from lived there for 3 years and nobody gave him a hard time, well then it belongs to the purchaser, and also heirs. Right? If heirs inherit property and they could just say, look, our father had a chazaka, our father was on this property for years and nobody gave him a hard time, so that would be a good enough argument. So just like over here as well, right? So the person is purchasing this property and in the backyard there's a dovecote. So even though there's not enough area surrounding it technically, but the assumption is the previous owner had this dovecote, nobody gave him a hard time, so therefore the buyer can also kind of inherit that status. So Marpapa V'Temer of Zviz also matters to Anilokech that Bezdin makes a taina for a purchaser, that as long as the purchaser can show that the person who purchased it from lived there for 3 years, nobody gave him a hard time, so then that's enough, it belongs to the buyer. V'toan and Liorish, and we also would argue on behalf of heirs, right? That if somebody comes and says, hey, your father's property belongs to me, and they say, look, our father had a chazaka on it, so that would be enough. Yoresh Tonina, so the heirs, we already have a Mishnah to teach us that. Haba mishum Yerusha einu tzarich taina. That's something that is inherited. So then, right, so Rashi says, einu tzarich taina, einu tzarich lomer ato macharta la'avi. Right, meaning the heirs don't need to prove that their father bought it from this person. It's enough for them to just say that look, our father had this property for 3 years and nobody gave us a hard time then, so it belongs to us. So lokech it's tuchale. Yeah, it's a good point, right? That we do already have that Mishnah by the heirs, but we need to teach the halacha about a purchaser. Lokech nami tanino. But we also have another Mishnah about purchasers. If a person buys a chotzer and there are things like mirpesets and different things jutting out into Rishus Harabim. So arezeh b'chez koso. So if a person purchases his chotzer and there's these platforms and balconies sticking out of it over Rishus Harabim, we assume that it's okay and that and that there's no problem with it, right? As long as there's a kind of a chazaka that, right, that it was like this for a while and nobody gave them a hard time. So tzricha, we need both these cases. We need the case of the dovecoat as well as the case of the chotzer and Rishus HaRabim. Diashmin Hasam, if you'd only have the case of the chotzer and with the stuff jutting out into Yerushalayim, so Gabi Rishus, not Yerushalayim, Rishus HaRabim. So the Amor Kones L'soch Shalo Hu. Well, I could say that, well, maybe the reason why we'd be torn in L'lokeach by the situation of the chotzer is because maybe he recessed the chotzer into his property so that he can have the mirpesets still within his property. So actually, the mirpesets are not over Rishus HaRabim; they're actually over his own property because he recessed his chotzer so that he could have these balconies overhanging and still be within the boundaries of his property. Alternatively, maybe the people in Rishus HaRabim said it's okay. You could build these balconies. But over here, low. But we would not say so by the dovecoats in the private property. And if we would say over here that the purchaser sort of gets grandfathered in, because since he's an individual, maybe I'll say that the previous owner, convinced the neighbor to be okay with it. Alternatively, or maybe for whatever reason the neighbor said it's okay. Who's gonna, how are you gonna convince all of Rishus HaRabim? Uman Shavik, and who has the power of Rishus HaRabim to say like, yeah, it's okay, you could do it. Say Melos, maybe I'll say that you don't get grandfathered in tzrichos, therefore we need both cases, the case of a dovecoat as well as the case of the chotzer and Rishus HaRabim, that you can kind of get, that when you buy something, a chazaka is enough. Harei b'chazkaso, we say that it remains in its chazaka. Ve'omer Rav Nachman Omer Rabba B'Avua ein chazaka l'nizakim. But didn't we say earlier that Rav Nachman says in Rav B'Avua that there's no chazaka when it comes to nizakim? So what does he mean that it just kind of gets grandfathered in because of this chazaka, and therefore you can have this dovecoat right next to your friend's property, to your neighbor's property? But I thought that there's no chazaka when it comes to nizakim. Rav Mari Omer B'Kutra, Rav Zvid Omer B'Vesakise. Rav Mari says that specifically by the smoke or by a bathroom, but something like this dovecoat, for example, we would say that there could be a chazaka. Okay. So now we get to the next Mishnah. Nipola nimtza beso chamishim amo arei usha bala shovach. So if you have a dovecoat and you find a little bird, within 50 amis of the dovecoat, so that bird belongs to the owner of the dovecoat. But if you find this bird outside of 50 amis, so it belongs to whoever finds it. Nimtza bein shnei shovchis. So if it's found between two dovecoats. Now Rashi and the Mishnah says within 50 amas of each of them. Now later, it gets a little bit confusing later on in the Gemara, later on in the Amud. We're going to talk about scenarios where maybe it's even more than 50 amas. But anyways, okay, so Rashi is talking about 50 amas. So let's say you have two dovecoats. Let's say they're 50 amas away from each other, and you find this bird, and it's 20 amas away from one, 30 amas away from the other. So Karav Laze Shelo, so whoever the bird is closer to, we treat it as his. Mechza Mechza, it's mamish in the middle, Shnei Mechloku, so they would cut it in half. Amr Reb Chanina, it says Reb Chanina, Rov v'karov holchin achar harov. That when you have rov, and when you have karov, when you can go either by a majority or by proximity, you go based on the majority. V'afagav deruba d'oraisa, v'kurva d'oraisa. We're going to flesh this out in a second. And even though rov is midoraisa and Kurva is midaraisa. Afilu hachi. Even so, ruba, adif. If we have to choose between rov and karov, rov is adif. Masiv Reb Zeir. Reb Zeir asks a kasha. V'haya ir akrova el achalo. And it will be, right, this is talking about Egla Arufa. Right, you find a corpse outside of a city, right in the middle between hither and yon. You find a corpse. So the city that's closest to that corpse, they bring this calf and they break its neck in like a desolate area. So it says over there by Egla Rufa, V'haya ir akrova el achalo. And it will be the city that is closest, karov, closest to the corpse. And even though there might be others that have more people, and therefore, if we go based on rov, the majority, chances are, based on likelihood in terms of majority, it came from that other place. Like I was thinking, for example, let's say you find a corpse right outside of Beit Zayit. Beit Zayit is like the first moshav outside of Yerushalayim. So you find this corpse outside of Beit Zayit. So if we go based on proximity, okay, it's closest to Beit Zayit. If we go based on rov, well, I mean, Yerushalayim is way bigger than Beit Zayit. So if we had to sort of like say, based on terms of like populations, what's the likelihood that this random person that we found came from Yerushalayim or Beit Zayit? There's a way more people in Yerushalayim. So if we say go by rov, we should say that it's Yerushalayim. But if we go based on karov, we should say it's Beit Zayit. And we're saying that v'haya ha'ira karov elachalo. They go based on the closer ones. So even though there's rov and there's karov, you go based on karov, not based on rov. Reb Chanina said though you go based on rov ha. So v'haya ha'ira karov elachalo. V'avgav dika achrisa denefisha mina. Even though there might be another city that's bigger than it, still we go based on karov b'deleka. So, and for the Gemara, Taka is talking about a scenario where there is not a larger city. BavaBasra ruba de alma. Okay, fine. So maybe there isn't another city that has more people in it. But what about ruba de alma? If I were to at random pluck a person out of planet Earth, the chances are they come from China or from India. So, yeah, okay, so you find this corpse outside of a city. And we say, okay, well, there's no bigger cities around there to say rov. But what about the rov of the world? If we would just kind of pluck a person at random, they probably did not come from this city. If you pluck a person at random from the world, they probably came from somewhere in India or China. They probably did not come from whatever city you're next to right now. So, and for the Gemara, B'Yosheves ben Aharim, it's talking about a city that is situated among the mountains. And therefore, as Rashi says, what does Rashi say? She'ein derech rotzchim lavo mimakomos acherim lechan. Murderers are not going to come from other places to here. So Mistama, this is a local job, and therefore, because it's a very isolated place, so that is why we go based on Karov. Over here, we go based on the closer city, which is very interesting because it sounds like what we're saying is that Egla Arufa, and this whole concept of the closest city, seems to be specifically, at least according to this, specifically when it comes to a city that's like isolated and far away from anything else. Tanan, we learned in our Mishnah, Nipala nimtza besoch chamishim ama areu shabal ashovach. That if you find a bird within 50 amas of the dovecote, it belongs to the owner of the dovecote. Even though there might be other dovecotes that have more birds, so there's rov, still it sounds like we're saying we're going after karov. B'dileka, no, there are no others that have more. If that's the case, I'll say this, that if you find a bird more than 50 amas away, then it belongs to the person who found it. And if we're talking about where there's no other dovecotes around, okay, well, if there's no other dovecotes around, then where did it come from? It must have come from the dovecote that's closest to it, which is that one dovecote. So why are we saying that anybody can have it? So I don't know how to say it, bimidada, where it's kind of hopping around. I guess it's not flying. And till the end of the Gemara, it's like, I feel like it's like a little loose. I don't know, something's like funny about it. So it's not like flying. I guess it's a young bird that's like hopping around rather than flying. And the Amar Rav Ukva Bar Chama, Kol HaMidade Ein Midade Yoser Minun. That when you have a bird that kind of hops around, it's not going to go further than 50. And therefore, if you found it more than 50, then how did it get there? It must have flown. If it flown, where did it fly from? It may have flown from anywhere. And therefore, you can keep it if it's more than 50 amas away. But Rabbi Yirmiyah as raglo achas besoch nun am of raglo achas chutz mi-chamishim ama mau. What if one of the bird's feet was within 50 amas and the other foot was outside of 50 amas? Then what? Aldona afku Rabbi Yirmiyah ben Midrash. I don't really know what that means. Apparently, what does the Gosa Bach say? It says nearby ayin beper get poshit. Get poshit is at the end of, I think it's the last parak of BavaBasra. So I don't know. I'm curious what that means. What they kick Rabbi Yirmiyah out of the Beis HaMedrash? I don't know. But anyways, he asked this very technical question, right? What if one foot of the bird is within 50 amas, the other one's outside 50 amas, and that apparently got him kicked out of the Beis HaMedrash. Tashma, come here. Nimtza bein shnei shovchis. If you find this bird between two dovecotes, karvlaze shalo. Okay, if it's closer to this one, it belongs to the owner of its owner. Karvlaze shalo. If it's closer to the other one, it belongs to the other owner. Afal gad dechad minayu nofish michavre. And this is, and even though one of them might have more birds than the other. So again, we're getting back to the question of Karov and Rov. We're going based on Karov, right? We're saying that if, right, we had said in the Mishnah, if you have two dovecotes, right, and you find the bird closer to one of the dovecotes, so it belongs to the dovecote that it's closer to. What if the other dovecote has more birds? Then you have Rov and Karov, and yet we're saying we're going after Karov. No, they both have the same amount of birds. That's why we go based on Karov. Why not go based on Ruba de Alma? And what does Rashi say? Rashi says, "V'leizo bas Ruba de Alma, v'le'avishom motzo de kosa gadatich de nimtza ben shtei shovchos achutz lechamishim ama nami koi to nafik le mitaras medada." So Rashi says, meaning that even if they found it. But even if the bird was more than 50 amas away, we would still say that it goes based on the closer one. But why not say that it came from some random place? Where are we? Why not assume that the bird came from anywhere, from some other place? Here we're talking about in like lots of vineyards, and it's hopping around. And there's lots of vineyards, and that if it can't be that it came from some random place, because it came into midade, because since we're talking about a bird that's hopping around, lo matzi asi, it wouldn't have been able to come from some random place. Okay, apparently with these birds that hop around, they're not going to go so far away. They're only going to go as far as they could still see their nest. And therefore, we're talking about this area which has lots of vineyards. So this bird was able to, I guess, go from like its dovecote and like from one vineyard to the next, and it would still be able to see its dovecote. That's why we're assuming that it didn't come from some random place. But because if it came from some random place, then it wouldn't be able to see where it came from. And again, we're talking about these birds that are hopping around, so it wouldn't be able to be possible that the bird is hopping around and still go like super far. All right. Well, that was Daf Chav Gimel Masechta BavaBasra. We learned 3 Mishnayos today. The first one was talking about the Goddess and the martins, and then the next Mishnah I was talking about these right the 50 amas. They have to distance the dovecote and the eating and the chazakas, and they're getting grandfathered in by Yerusha and by Lekeach, and then we talked about Rov Vikarov Olech Achar Rov, and we're going to continue with that tomorrow. Peace out.